Please join me in welcoming Olivia Walton and President Barack Obama.
Well, I love you back. It's good to see you. But you didn't tell me it gets this cold in Arkansas. Golly.
Mr. President, thank you so much for being here. I mean, it is just an honor. It really is. And thank you to all of you who were waiting for so long. We really appreciate the patience. I mentioned this to you a little while earlier, but that's my 7-year-old there in the front row.
Hey, you.
And yesterday...
I'm Michelle Obama's husband.
That's right. That's right. She said, "What's all the fuss, Mama? What are you getting ready for?" And I said, "President Obama is coming." And she said, "Like Michelle Obama?" And I said, "That's right. That's right.
Just like her.
Michelle's husband is coming."
It's hard to believe that she'd be married to somebody this old.
Well, she looks great. Okay, so President Obama, you're a bit of a sports guy, right?
I am.
Earlier today, we were walking through Crystal Bridges. We walked through Get in the Game. Saw you light up. I thought maybe we could do this convo a little bit like a sports game.
Yep.
Started off sort of some drills, warm up, lightning round, quick answers.
Got it.
Get into game time, more serious conversation about where we are as a country, where we're going, what you're doing about it.
All right.
And then a little cool down. So you go home in the right headspace.
I definitely need the warm-up and the cool-down.
Okay.
We'll see how I perform during the game.
Okay. You ready?
I am.
Okay. What books, music, or art have been inspiring you lately?
What books, music, or art? Well, I'm in the middle of writing a book, and that's not inspiring. A friend of mine who's a very accomplished writer, I asked her once, "Do you enjoy writing?" She says, "No, I like having written."
Yeah.
I like when it's done. You know, I have been listening to a lot of old stuff, Otis Redding, some Bob Dylan. I've been going back to some music that even my daughters will acknowledge is pretty good. In terms of reading, I have been, when I'm writing, it's hard for me to read anything policy related, so I tend to read fiction. And I just finished a book called The Buffalo Hunter, which is a book of fiction about Native Americans, and it's a little violent.
But inspirational.
But inspirational. And I've been reading a biography of James Baldwin, which is outstanding, but it's very thick. So, yeah.
What's your news diet?
My news diet. You know what I don't have is a news feed. In fact, the entire time, people used to ask, "You seem so calm, Mr. President, why is that?" No drama, Obama. I said, that's because I don't watch the news. Now, it is genuinely true. I have not watched cable news in 15 years. And I don't scroll. I'm old school, and I read a pretty wide mix of publications. You know, I'll read Wall Street Journal, I'll read New York Times, I'll read The Atlantic or science magazines. That's where I get my information from.
Is there one outlet out there that you would consider the least bias, sort of the most straight news?
Here's the thing. I actually think that the mainstream news still does a very good job of just presenting facts. I think cable, regardless of the cable station, has fallen prey to the same economic imperatives that we're seeing in every other type of news, which is you are deliberately controversial, deliberately aggressive, deliberately trying to make people feel angry and aggrieved because that attracts attention. Now I'm talking about broadcast.
Yeah.
With respect to print media, I think actually there are a lot of good sources. It's trying to sort through the garbage that makes it difficult because there's so much noise out there.
I got you out of the lightning round mode. Best and worst parts about living in the White House?
Best parts, Truman balconies, a really nice view. South Lawn, Jefferson Monument, Washington Monument in the background. Very cool, summer night, sitting out there. Music, I mentioned earlier that we had these White House performances that would be on PBS. They'd rehearse the night before, and the East Room is right beneath the Treaty Room, which is my office and was my office in the residence, and so you'd hear them practicing, and I could sneak down the back stairs, and you'd watch like Mick Jagger practicing with Robert Johnson Jr. or Justin Timberlake and Aretha Franklin doing something, and that was very cool. Worst part of living in the White House is just being trapped. This is a tip for everybody listening, because we live in an age that puts so much currency on fame and likes and Instagram and all that. Anonymity is not bad. The ability, what you miss most acutely and you don't fully understand is the pleasures of just walking around with people or taking a drive or going into a park or what have you, and nobody's paying attention to you. And it's a high-class problem to have. I'm not suggesting that in any way it was, my biggest hardship. But I would have dreams. And I didn't have that many dreams in the White House because I was so dog-tired. When my head hit the pillow, I was out. Get those 5 hours and then, I was back up. But I would have this recurring dream in which I would just be taking a walk and nothing was happening. And I'd realize at some point that nobody knew who I was and there was no Secret Service. And I'd just sit on a bench and sip on a soda pop. And it was really nice. And so that's the thing I think that was hardest. I think Michelle was more adventurous. She couldn't afford to be more adventurous when we were there during those 8 years.
A world leader that surprised you in a good way?
World leader that surprised me. Well, I loved Angela Merkel. We ended up becoming very close. She was probably she was the leader of Europe during my presidency. And we were both sort of rational, practical folks. She was a scientist by training. So folks used to say I was a little Spock-like or professorial. She and I, hooked, we were right there. But the reason it might have been surprising is when we first met, I was still running. And we had traveled, I took my first overseas trip as the nominee. And I visited Afghanistan, and we went to Kuwait, Israel, and then we ended in Germany. And we had decided, these are the kinds of things, we didn't know any better. This is the thing about a young, stupid candidate. It was all, and my young, stupid team. Let's have an outdoor rally in Berlin, even though you're not president yet. And so originally we were going to do it at the Brandenburg Gate, where Ronald Reagan had spoken. And Merkel was already chancellor, and she thought correctly that it would be inappropriate to have somebody who's still running for president speak in this historic site. So she objected. I knew nothing about all this. This was at a staff level. This was being discussed. But she said no, and then it was communicated to us as if she was grumpy about it. So we did it out in a big park, and we ended up having about 250,000 people show up from around Europe, and because we didn't know any better. But she was very sensitive about this, and so the first time I met, she was very apologetic. She said, no hard feelings, I hope, I hope you didn't take it personally. I said, it turned out fine. I won. Yeah. So
and I remember that.
She was good lady. I like Miss Merkel.
Okay, last one for the warm-up.
Yeah.
Is there a moment from the White House that still gives you goosebumps?
I've said this before. The day, the evening that the Affordable Care Act passed was the best. The votes got tallied. It had been this, incredible process, and it looks like it had looked like we had fallen short probably 5-6 different times. It had been declared dead, and finally we were all in the cabinet room watching the votes go up, and when that last vote comes, everybody had worked on it, clapped and hugged, and it turned out Michelle and the girls were out somewhere. They were traveling, so I had the house to myself. So typical bachelor type, hey, everybody, why don't you come on up to our place?
In the White House.
In the White House, yeah. Up the residence, and so you've got all these young people, and the thing I think people don't fully appreciate is you have the president, you have the cabinet, and typically folks in their, say, between 40 and 65. But you have all these 25 and 35-year-olds who are just grinding. I mean, they're not getting paid any money, and they're just working tirelessly and brilliantly and navigating all the details of the process and answering questions for folks, and so they're putting all their hearts into it. And to have them all there, and then I said to them, and I meant this, I said, this moment right here is more satisfying. It means more to me than the day I got elected. Because the point of getting elected was to do this. And for us to have gotten this done, for you guys to have gotten this done, is a vindication of my confidence in your capacity and our capacity to move the country forward. Not make it perfect, You know, the Affordable Care Act, I always used to call it was like a starter house. It was just like Social Security was. You start something, it's not perfect, it's not modest, and you have the opportunity then to continue to make it better. But seeing those young people who had been along for that ride feel as if they had made that happen, yeah, that was good. That was a good day. Yeah, that was. And lo and behold, it's still around.
Parts of it.
Shockingly, and 50 million people have used it, and so that's good.
It's good. I think you're feeling warm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It meant so much to us that you came to the museum earlier and spoke with all those school kids, and we got to tour the president and Valerie around the galleries a little bit. Our mission here at Crystal Bridges is to welcome all to celebrate the American spirit in a setting that unites the power of art with the beauty of nature. Mr. President, you have spent a lifetime, well, I did read volume 1, you've spent since college thinking deeply about this nation, its contradictions, its potential, its possibility. What does the American spirit mean to you?
Well, first of all, let me just compliment Alice and all who helped to make this happen. I marvel at what has been accomplished, and I know it's just the beginning. But community spaces like this, the power of community gathering places, museums, libraries, we so underestimate how important that is to building a sense of nationhood. And so when I think about the American spirit, it goes back to de Tocqueville, right? His famous book. He writes, well, what is it about these Americans that makes them different? And there are a couple things. The precursor of it is this notion of citizenship. And all that embodies, we the people, right? This was the first place in human history at a large scale that had the audacity to say every individual is not a subject. They don't have a fixed place on some hierarchy. Everybody who qualifies, right? So obviously it took a little work to get there, but conceptually the idea was nobody's worse than me and nobody's better than me. I look them in the eye, and if they're good people, if they work hard, if they, I can do what they do, they can do what I do, we can work together. That sense of citizenship is powerful, and then what de Tocqueville talked about is somehow everybody decides, yeah, we're going to just do stuff together. We'll put a barn up. We'll put a committee together and dig a canal. We'll set up a school. We'll form an organization to promote whatever crazy thing people are interested in. And so you have this proliferation of joiners and volunteers and a civil society that gets built up. And so, and alongside that is this idea that each individual has the power to do what they want, to pursue happiness, which is to make something better of themselves, regardless of where they start. Those ideas, right? You have this twin idea of individual initiative, working hard, taken responsibility for your own life, and your fate is not predetermined by caste or, whether your folks are important. It's just, you can make something. That individualism combined with this sense of, and together we can do some things to build up a country. That's, the essence of, to me, what the American spirit is about. Now, I mentioned that there was a caveat. We, the people, didn't include everybody. Certainly didn't include African-American slaves. It didn't include women at that time. It sort of included them, but not, couldn't be in charge of stuff or vote. White men without property could not vote. Right? So it was still restrictive. So the last element, and I mentioned this to the young people that I was speaking to today, of the American spirit is each successive generation deciding we can remake this. There's a process of self-invention that is uniquely American, that you just don't see in other places. That sense of each generation deciding, you know what, that doesn't look right to me. I think we can make it a little bit better. That doesn't seem just. We can fix that. You combine that's why we've been an eternally youthful nation and a forward-looking nation. It's not that we ignore the past, but that hasn't been our primary fixation. Our fixation's been forward, next frontier. And I worry sometimes about us losing those elements, but you got to watch out for asking open-ended questions to former senators.
Oh, they warned me. They warned me. You got a great team.
Start filibustering.
Something we talk a lot about down here is patriotism. This is a very patriotic part of the country, and yet patriotism sort of feels politicized in this moment. And I love how in Volume 1, remember he's working on Volume 2, which you're all going to go buy. Almost done.
Next year. Didn't quite make this shopping season.
You write about your unshakable pride, and you write about how you would chafe against these arguments against American exceptionalism. So what do you say to folks, even in your own party, who say, I don't want to celebrate America? Why is your pride so unshakable?
Well, it's interesting. Part of maybe why I feel and felt, even as a young person, patriotic, was because I had lived overseas. Sometimes you need that contrast to not take things for granted. And some of you know my biography. I'd grown up in Hawaii for a while, and then my mother remarried, and I went to Indonesia for a few years before I came back. And it's an amazing part of the world, Southeast Asia, but it will also make you painfully aware of how poor people can be and how unequal societies can be. And I've written about this even in my first book. My mother and I are there, and just the standard operating procedure of paying bribes to get stuff done, or people hiding if they had a refrigerator because they didn't want anybody to know, so that they wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. And if you wanted to start a business, you had to, pay somebody off or hire somebody's cousin. And so what I always understood was that for all our flaws, the idea of America was powerful. And it was the reason why it was a magnet for people from other parts of the world to come here. And I think the reason I think patriotism got politicized is that both the left and the right sometimes got confused in thinking that it was not possible to take an honest look at America's flaws and be critical of it and still love it. And that's a mistake, right? It is a great expression of love for this country to say that we have not always been perfect. And the reason we have kept getting better is because we had a bunch of people who said, this isn't as good as we can be. But the ideals were there. That was the North Star that pointed us in that direction. And that's the exceptionalism of America. There have been empires of every sort on every continent that have had the biggest armies or had the most money or built the biggest monuments, and it's bounced around from Egypt to Greece to China. That's not unique to America. Their empires have risen and fallen. You know what's been pretty unique is this idea that you get a bunch of people from every corner of the planet who don't look alike, don't worship exactly the same way to their God, and don't even, don't eat the same foods, don't have the same last names, but somehow they're all working together and they can figure out how to make this place their own and live together and create something that hasn't been there before. That's what makes this country exceptional. And so I think it's fair to say that my view of patriotism is different from our current president's. But it's also different from some critics on the left of America who tend to ascribe every problem in the world as something America did. Well, that's not accurate either. Yeah, we've made mistakes, but people sometimes ask me what surprised me most when I became president. It wasn't the workload or, Roswell and where we keep the aliens.
Do we though?
That I suspected.
Okay.
No, what surprised me most was actually the degree to which the international order that the greatest generation built after World War II, we underwrote this enormous era of progress that I think we take for granted. I'm 64. From the time I was born in 1961, over the course of 6 decades, in the aggregate, the world became drastically wealthier, drastically better educated, significantly more peaceful. Infant mortality plunged, extreme poverty plunged. People got healthier. People got more tolerant. People took advantage of opportunities that they had never imagined before. And that happened not just here, but globally. And we underwrote that system. Imperfectly. It was flawed, but that's what happened. And so I had no problem when I was traveling acknowledging when we screwed up and didn't live up to our ideals, because I could also say, yeah, but look at everything we've done. And what an extraordinary accomplishment that is. And there's never been a country as powerful as we had been over those 60 years that were so willing to try to help make every place else better. And yeah, I can, those aren't contradictory ideas.
So we're 2025.
Yeah.
And we hear democracy is in danger. We're more divided than ever. Is it? Are we? Or are we still sort of on this path of gradual but unsteady improvement, and this fierce partisanship is actually part of the design of the system?
I think it is true that we are more divided and that our democracy is more unstable than any time in my lifetime, not in American history. I mean, you know, we did have like a civil war and stuff. I mean, there've been some pretty big, you know, breakdowns in the process. But I would say that the order, the system, the sets of institutions that were built after World War II and then refined over the course of subsequent generations, I think those are unstable in ways I would not have expected. I would not have expected the legitimacy of an election and the peaceful transfer of power to have been challenged. I thought that was not something that would happen today. I would not expect the politicization of the Justice Department or our military. And I don't think that's happened. I think there's been resistance, particularly in the military, to that. But the degree to which that has been encouraged, you know, that used to be something that I would lecture other countries not to do. You don't have your military involved in partisan politics. Its loyalty is to the Constitution. Its loyalty is not to any party. Its loyalty is not to any party, and it is not to any president. When I came into office, my working assumption was that I did not win the Pentagon vote. I'm running against John McCain, a war hero and POW, and I am a 47-year-old African-American from Chicago who had never served. And when I was sworn into office and I boarded Marine One or Air Force One, they saluted. And if I said, this is what we need to do, they said, yes, sir. And when I'm sitting with my Joint Chiefs of Staff, they are giving me their best unvarnished advice. And over time, I didn't just win them following orders. They would say, because they've written about it, I won their respect because they never saw me make a decision about national security that in any way was affected by me worrying about my politics. Because they also understood we were in the middle of two wars, and the most sacred duty I had was if I was going to send some 22-year-old kid on the other side of the world and potentially would die, I could not look myself in the mirror if I was making those decisions based on politics. That is part of our government, self-government, that should be unimpeachable. I think the Justice Department, Eric Holder was my Attorney General. I never spoke to him about any active case because our democracy requires that no one is above the law, and that as best as we can manage it, the power of the state is wielded in an objective way that people can trust. So that when a prosecutor says somebody does something, we know they have to present their evidence. And when a judge rules on something, we are going to abide by it, even if we don't like it, because we believe that their fealty is to that higher standard. And so there are norms like that that have been eroded, actively undermined in some cases, that I believe are a problem. And those are not, those norms, those rules, and those values are not Republican or Democratic. They are American. And so So I have been concerned, and I've expressed this publicly, the degree to which I think folks have been willing to overlook those things, in part out of fear that they are going to be punished by the state. That's what is supposed to happen someplace else. It's not supposed to happen here. It's just not. And I've said to, you know, there have been times where I've been speaking to business leaders who've come up to me and said, yeah, I know this is crazy, but, you know, we don't want to be. I said, you know what? Here's the thing, though. I've been in other countries where it looks like you can avoid, keep your head down, but eventually, when these norms and rules of law are broken, sooner or later, it gets you too. Sooner or later, because you're now operating on whim. And preferences of one person or another, and people are trading favors. And it may seem convenient sometimes, but if you're getting the outcomes you want. But over the long term, you're breaking down what makes this system work. So I do think that is a problem. Last point I'll make. The reason I think that we have found ourselves in a position where where we have folks in power who are not abiding as much as I would like with these norms and rules, does have to do with underlying divisions in our society that had been building up for some time. And there are several reasons for that. Part of it is we have political rules that encourage polarization. I was mentioning to some folks over lunch, political gerrymandering has now created a situation where districts are drawn with such precision that if you're in a Republican district, you'll never lose to a Democrat, so all you have to worry about is not being primaried by somebody even further to the right than you. And if you're in a Democratic district, all your concerns are about are the most extreme elements of your party. And then social media compounds that, because the folks who get the most attention on social media are the ones with the most extreme, absolutist, maximalist positions on every single issue. And they make the most noise. They get the most attention, and they get the most hits and the most likes. And the economics of these platforms and their algorithms drive in that direction. And so we have replaced what used to be genuine communities, little leagues and PTAs and, mean folks at the bowling alley and at the bar and wherever else you would get to know people, in which case you understood people are complicated and nobody has exactly one view on everything. And, the person who's a little more conservative than you turns out, man, such good people, and, helped you out when you needed something around the house. And the person who seemed like this really crazy, wacky liberal, man, they're really, a great teacher and really helped my kid doing something. And so you're not making judgments about people based on some labels and algorithms. We now occupy that space, and that undermines that part of American exceptionalism that I mentioned earlier about us being joiners and us just, constantly interacting with people and being in public spaces and getting to know each other and telling each other stories so that we understood each other and gave each other the benefit of the doubt. That's what we've lost. So I don't think you can just fix it by fixing political rules or electing, one party over another. That's not going to solve the entire problem. I think we have to change some of the civic habits underlying some of these issues, which partly means getting off the phone, but.
And it also means having more civic spaces for this kind of stuff to happen. So you mentioned getting to know people face to face. You mentioned building respect with your military. You're inaugurating our Building Bridges conversation series. I'm wondering, are there other moments of connection or relationship building that stick with you from the White House?
It's interesting. So I get out of college. I decide I want to be involved in the public interest somehow, working in communities. I didn't want to be a politician. I thought, politicians are phony. I don't want to be involved in that. But I was inspired by the civil rights movement and community-based change. So after working for a couple of years to pay off my student loans, I go to Chicago, and I started working with a group of churches in the south side of Chicago. Steel plants had closed there. It was early 80s and early mid 80s. And so I'd work with these churches, church-based groups, developing civic leaders to then voice their proposals and vision for how they could make their community better and bring back jobs. And then they would go meet with elected officials and in some cases local businesses to try to get initiatives going. That's where I actually got my best education in community building. And it's actually what it eventually took me to the White House, although that wasn't my original plan. And the first month I was there, I had this old organizer. He had been involved in union organizing, and then he had been involved in church-based organizing. And he said, the only thing I want you to do for a month is just go around and interview people in the community. I just want you to find out their stories, what they're about, who they are, and then report back to me. And I did that even though I thought, well, this is kind of lame. I know what, look at this neighborhood, it's poor, it needs this, it needs that. And so the first couple I did were kind of cursory. I'd be kind of taking notes, how old are you, how long you've been a member of this church, and what issues do you care about? And I'd come back, and he says, you weren't listening. You thought you knew them. Go back. And over time, what I figured out was it's an art, it's a discipline to really listen to people and see them and listen and be genuinely curious about who people are. And it turns out that everybody's got a story. And everybody's got a story of where they're from and who their families were and what their values were. And they have tragedies that they overcame, and they have hopes that weren't realized, and they have victories that might have been quiet and nobody else noticed. And if you can listen to people and actually get a sense of who they are and what's important to them, then you can build trust. And you can build relationships, and on the basis of that trust and relationship, now you can start working with them. And by the way, you can start sharing a little bit of yourself so they have a sense of who you are. And that's really what ended up being the basis of my politics, was this confidence that I don't care that I've got a funny name and I'm that you can't pronounce, because at the time nobody could pronounce it, or that I'm from Chicago, or I will go into a county full of farms where nobody looks like me. I will find out how your story connects to mine, because I'll bet it does. And it did. And that, I think, is a really powerful tool. Now, it didn't always work with Congress. And the reason it did not work with Congress, and so this goes back, it didn't always work with, interestingly enough, it did work with Congress before I became president. Like, I was the most popular Democrat with Republicans until I actually was in charge. Funny how that works. And then suddenly all the Republicans were all like, he's so standoffish and, never invites us over. It was like, John, you are lying. I have had you over I don't know how many darn times. You drank my wine, and what are you talking about? But that would be the storyline, and the press would kind of buy into it. The reason it did not work was what I was referring to earlier. The voting public had gotten so polarized. Okay? The cable news networks had gotten so polarized that Republicans, it did not matter what my relationship was with people, the way I was being projected and portrayed, and let's face it, it was on Fox News and on Rush Limbaugh, and so I'll name a few names here, but it's not a secret. They would have to override whatever personal relationships we had, because they thought they would be politically punished if they were seen as being too cooperative or too close with me. All right? So the incentive structure for politicians was to be polarized and to look like you couldn't relate to the other person. And we live in that even more now than we did back then. When I first came to the Senate, I was just writing about this. My senator when I was in Hawaii growing up was Daniel Inouye. He had been a Japanese American who in World War II served in one of the famous all Japanese brigades. He received the Medal of Honor, lost an arm, ended up becoming Hawaii senator for 49 years. His best friends in the Senate were Bob Dole, Republican, who had also lost use of an arm, and in fact were side by side in the hospital after they had both been wounded. Bob Dole from Kansas, Danny Inouye from Hawaii, and Ted Stevens, another World War II veteran from Alaska. And nobody in Hawaii or Kansas punished Dole or Inouye for working together on issues. It wasn't seen as, you're a Republican in name only, or, you're not orthodox enough Democrat, because that's not how voters were judging them. But that just does not exist in the Senate anymore. So that's the challenge that we have. And that's why, as frustrating as politicians can be sometimes, and you'll hear voters saying, why can't they just get along? Why can't they get stuff done? The truth is that there are a bunch of structures that have been set up that don't give them an incentive to work together. In fact, the opposite, they get punished. And I would like to think, because this is how I operated, that there are times where I'll just do what I think is right, even if it's bad for me politically. But you can't expect all of them to do that. And so we as voters, as citizens, have to think about do we really reward people if they don't agree with us on everything? I think a lot of us as voters, we get mad if we think that whoever it is, the person that we're supposed to vote for, or whatever party we belong to, if they stray a little bit from orthodoxy, we think, they betrayed us, as opposed to thinking, well, you know what? Maybe they're compromising. Maybe they're being sincere to their values.
Yeah. Maybe it's leadership.
Maybe that's part of leadership.
Which brings us to the Obama Presidential Center. So our two organizations feel so aligned, believing in the power of museums, the power of libraries, of cultural spaces. You're opening in 2026. Mm-hmm. We're going to have an Arkansas reunion up there.
We're going to treat you all good.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Thank you.
And by the way, we're going to open like in June so that y'all don't have to bring your coats up.
Thank you. Very thoughtful, very thoughtful.
Just letting you know.
And Valerie wanted me to tell you that it is still spring in June. Exactly. What's your hope for the center? How do you want people to feel when they walk away? What does it do for the south side of Chicago?
Well, what's been remarkable just being here at Crystal Bridges, and then I had the benefit of seeing the mock-up of what's going to happen with the health complex that Alice has conceived, and now folks are starting to put together. We had the same idea, which was we want to create a campus, a place where the public gathers for a range of things that puts them face to face with each other and gets them to meet and be in dialogue and conversation and exposed to new ideas with each other. So there's the museum portion of the Presidential Center where you can see Michelle's dresses. I know. And there'll be cool exhibits and about, for example, we have a whole exhibit just focused on the incredible service of our men and women in uniform during 2 wars, and stories of veterans, and what that meant, and the work Michelle did to support families while folks were overseas and so forth. But we also have a Chicago Public Library on the site. We also have a audio and recording studio so that we can bring kids in to give them exposure to and training to how can they tell their stories and use their voice and amplify it. We have these incredible artists who are coming in, and everybody from Mark Bradford to Maya Lin, who did the Vietnam Memorial, to just an extraordinary array of artists who are commissioning pieces and who've done pieces for the museum. And we've got a bunch of classrooms where we're going to be doing our training and programming. And keep in mind that we've been doing programming for almost, I guess, 8 years now. And our goal has been to train the next generation of leaders around many of the values that I just spoke about this evening. Because it's my view that we underinvest in civic leadership and talent. Doug McMillan's here, Walmart, obviously. Have you guys heard of Walmart? It's a very successful company. And I don't know what Walmart budgets for developing its management, its leadership, its training programs, but I know it's substantial. We tend to assume civic leadership just happens, and we don't invest a lot in it. And what I discovered during my presidency, not just here in the United States, but around the world, you have these amazing young people. And when I say young, it's all relative. We have programs that reach into elementary schools, but our main focus is young people in their from 25 to 35 who are already doing remarkable things. Doctors who are working in Appalachia around the opioid crisis, or folks who are doing economic development in rural areas that need new strategies and anchors to bring jobs back in industry. And what we've discovered is they're doing great work already, but they don't have a lot of a support system. They don't have kind of blueprints for how to scale. They don't work across sectors. So if somebody's working on education, they're not in communication with somebody who's an entrepreneur who's doing business, and they could actually learn from each other. So the center will be a place where all those leaders and all the programs that we have can gather, share their ideas with each other, share it with the world. We'll be able to broadcast a lot of the work that we do so that it becomes virtual. We create a virtual classroom for civic education. Because my bet is that all the issues, problems that we have right now will be solved if old folks get out of the way and we turn the reins over to this next generation's coming up so that they can bring those good old-fashioned American values to new sets of problems that many of us, even my age, we're not going to experience. Part of the reason the country's been very slow in thinking about affordability when it comes to housing, for example, is because boomers all got their house. They bought a house back when you could buy a house. And they're the ones in charge. And so when suddenly you notice that first-time home buying used to be 30, and now it's 40, it's gone up a decade over the last 20 years, 20, 25 years. Oh, we need younger people to be able to see that and act on it in an effective way. And so our job and the center's job is to train them. And the last thing about the center, it is explicit about championing democracy. All our programming, all our displays argue and insist that for all its flaws, it is the best system we got. Nobody's designed something better. I spent a lot of time looking at a lot of history, and aren't that many countries I haven't been to. And yeah, it's the old adage, attributed to Churchill. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for every other system they've thought of. I mean, it's annoying, it's infuriating, it's slow, it's frustrating, it's inefficient. But, what it doesn't result in, it doesn't result in the Holocaust. It doesn't result in gulags. It doesn't result in the Cultural Revolution and millions of people starving. It doesn't result in people being afraid to speak their mind or worship the way they want or be able to read books that aren't prescribed. I'll take a little frustration and inefficiency, and stick with freedom and everybody being able to express themselves and try to figure out how we work together. So.
Well, Mr. President, I had about 4 pages of other questions that you've now evaded. No. I see that my shot clock has gone off, so I got to let you go. But let's just let's end with the cool down.
Okay. Need the cool down. I was getting hot there for a second.
Getting hot, yeah. Oh, you're lucky I didn't ask you about immigration. My husband, Tom, is right there in the front row. Mm-hmm. You and Michelle have become a symbol of a great partnership, a great marriage. Do you have any marriage advice for us?
Oh, Lord. well, let me say this. Michelle has all kinds of marriage advice, and I basically just agree with it. Now, look, it is interesting. I've now gone through a couple of cycles of folks who started working with me when they were right out of college and got married and then have families. And as I mentioned to a couple of folks earlier, I'm responsible for a lot of marriages. Nobody's named their kid Barack yet, which I'm a little offended by. But the thing that Michelle and I think would agree on is I don't think there's a magic secret to it. We fundamentally respect each other. And even when we have argued, had differences, etc., there's been an irreducible sense of this person is extraordinary, the thing we've built together is extraordinary, and of course it's hard because human relationships are hard, just like democracy is hard. Because you have to take the other person into account. You can't just tell them what to do. And obviously you always know better, and why aren't they listening? But what we've always concluded is, this other person is amazing, and the life we built together is remarkable, and so we will work at it and invest in it. And I think Michelle often says this, so I'm just repeating. I do think we do young people a disservice by just emphasizing romance in marriages. You can adore the other person, they can be hot and sexy and all that stuff. But you know what? When your kid's like 3 or 1 and you're changing diapers and you're working and she's working and you're coming home and you're tired and, there's toys you step on and, if somebody forgot to get the milk at the grocery store and when all that's happening, cute doesn't do it.
No.
It's work. It is work, and it's negotiation, and it's and if the underlying basis for it is respect and gratitude for what you've built together, then you will navigate through the frustrations, and that's effectively what we have done. But there aren't shortcuts to it. Now Michelle says this a lot on TV all the time, and at some point I say to her, can't you just say also I'm cute?
Yeah.
And you really adore me? Instead of just talking about how hard it is. But that too is part of the process, is we're not all gonna, Michelle doesn't believe in public displays of affection. Even if I start snuggling up to her a little too much, but you kind of figure that out about him. Yeah. Doesn't mean she doesn't love me.
I love it. Quick one. What are you learning from your daughters right now?
Oh, they teach me so much. The greatest blessing, Thanksgiving, we were just all together. Malia's 27 now, Sasha's 24. They are amazing young women. Look, objectively, they really are. I know every parent says this. I can get testimonials from strangers or near strangers. They're kind. They work hard. They don't have any sense of entitlement. They're gracious to everybody. They're funny. The thing they teach me the most, I think, is how to age gracefully, in the sense of one of the values of being a parent and seeing your kids develop is transitioning from the authority to a coach and a friend, and knowing that, I don't know everything and I can't solve all their problems for them, and sometimes I just have to just listen instead of thinking I'm going to come up with the answer. And also, they're good at upgrading my casual wardrobe. Oh. So I think there have been some times where they're all like, Dad, those jeans, about 15 years out of date. We don't want you to be right on point, but maybe just 5 years out of date would be better.
Love that. Final question. When progress feels slow or fragile, your brand is hope. What gives you personally hope?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. The young people I meet give me hope. The energy they've got, the insights, the sophistication, their natural instincts towards including people and being interested in people, even if they're not exactly like them. I think they're less parochial than we were. And the thing I try to just communicate to them is they too should be hopeful, because the only thing I worry about this upcoming generation is partly because of their phones. They are bombarded with a lot of bad news all the time. I mean, there's a sensory overload coming at them in ways that we just didn't experience. Right? And it starts at an early age. And part of what I try to emphasize to them is, yes, there are a lot of big problems today, but there really have always been a lot of big problems. In fact, I mentioned it earlier. If you looked at the course of human history and you asked yourself, you didn't know who you were ahead of time. You didn't know whether you were an Obama or a Walton or a Rodriguez or a, Chen, what country you were living. If you just said, behind the veil, when would you want to exist as a human, not knowing where you occupy, what station you occupy? You'd choose right now, with all the problems. The odds would be more likely that you had enough to eat, that you could read, that if you got pneumonia, you wouldn't die, that, you'd have a roof over your head and you could raise a family and support them and live a long, healthy life. The odds are higher today than ever. I said, so, yeah, we got some issues, but we've always had issues. And this goes back to the patriotism thing. There are times where I hear people say things like, race relations are worse than they've ever been. Well, that can't be true. That can't be true. That is, nah. That's not right. That's not true. Like, there's this, we're going back to, it's like Handmaid's Tale. Well, no, it's not that. Yeah, men can still be sometimes stupid, but they love their daughters, and I think we're past the point where systematically we're going to deprive women of their rights. So I am hopeful as long as young people don't succumb to cynicism or despair. Because if they believe in their future, they will lift us all up. All right? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.